Petitioner has established that petitioner and the families of Mr. Gene Hackman and Ms. Betsy Arakawa Hackman would suffer irreparable injury unless the court grants a preliminary injunction. Petitioner has established that the threatened injury does not outweigh any damage the injunction might cause the respondents. In Lee versus City of Seattle, the Washington Court of Appeals principally relied on the reasoning set forth in March to conclude that the trial court did not err when determining that release of any death scene photographs would violate the substantive due process rights of the family.
Gene Hackman, the esteemed actor, and his wife Betsy Arakawa were found deceased in their Santa Fe, New Mexico home on February 26, 2025. Hackman, aged 95, died from heart disease complicated by Alzheimer's, while Arakawa, 65, succumbed to hantavirus pulmonary syndrome. Their dog Zina also perished from dehydration and starvation. A hearing on Gene Hackman's death to determine whether to block the disclosure of a range of records from the investigation into the deaths of the actor and his wife. A court has cleared the way for the release of records about the deaths of Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa. The ruling from a New Mexico judge allows the possible release of redacted police body camera video and other investigative materials, including images of the couple's dead dog. All photos, video, and documents from the investigation had been restricted from release by an earlier temporary court order. Hackman was found dead along with his wife, Betsy Arakawa, at their home in Santa Fe on February 26, 2025. Following their deaths, the Hackman estate sought to block the public release of investigative records, particularly photographs and police body camera footage, to protect the family's privacy. A New Mexico court ruled that while some records could be released, any depictions of their bodies must remain sealed. The couple's wills, both signed in 2005, left their estates to each other. Since both are deceased, their representative, Julia Peters, is responsible for managing their estates. A representative for the Hackman family estate had urged a New Mexico judge to keep the records sealed to protect the family's constitutional right to privacy.
Miss Betsy Arakawa Hackman. However, petitioner does not cite any authority to unequivocally support the issuance of an injunction relating to autopsy reports, general depictions of the interior residence of the decedents, or depictions of deceased animals. Marsh versus County of San Diego stands for the proposition that the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution recognizes a family's right to privacy over death scene images showing a deceased person based on or upon substantive due process and, in certain circumstances, procedural due process protections. While the Supreme Court in Favish primarily analyzed the government's application of FOIA Exemption 7C, the Supreme Court's reasoning emphasized the well-established cultural tradition acknowledging a family's control over the body and death images of the deceased, which has long been recognized in common law. In Lee versus City of Seattle, the Washington Court of Appeals principally relied on the reasoning set forth in March to conclude that the trial court did not err when determining that release of any death scene photographs would violate the substantive due process rights of the family. Specifically, the Washington Court of Appeals held pursuant to the analysis set forth in March, the trial court correctly concluded that the release of the death scene photographs would shock the conscience and offend the community's sense of fair play and decency, violating the family's substantive due process rights under the 14th Amendment. Permanently enjoining the city from disclosing those photographs, according to this court, is a reasonable way to prevent such a violation. Given the above authority, any depictions of the deceased bodies of Mr. Hackman or Miss Arakawa Hackman are very likely protected from disclosure by IPRA's Law Enforcement Records Exception, Section 14-2-1.2A3, and IPRA's Catch-all Exception, Section 14-2-1L. Specifically, the court recognizes a 14th Amendment substantive due process right to privacy afforded to the families of Mr. Hackman and Miss Arakawa Hackman. Further, the court relies upon the U.S. Supreme Court authority and ruled that the common law protects a family's right to privacy and control over death scene images. Excuse me. The above discussed authority lends little support to enjoining respondents from disclosing any autopsy reports, assuming no photographs are included within the report. Visual depictions of a deceased animal or visual depictions inside the residence of Mr. Hackman and Miss Arakawa Hackman, assuming neither individuals within the photograph or video frame. It's also, my ruling also pertains to any audio recording. As to autopsy reports, the Office of Medical Investigators Regulations undercut petitioner's position that the autopsy report should be withheld from the public. Critically, those regulations identify the final report of death, the autopsy report, and the toxicology report as public records. The court grants in part and denies in part petitioner's amended petition for preliminary injunction. Petitioner has established that petitioner and the families of Mr. Gene Hackman and Miss Betsy Arakawa Hackman would suffer irreparable injury unless the court grants a preliminary injunction. Petitioner has established that the threatened injury does not outweigh any damage the injunction might cause the respondents. Petitioner has shown in part that the issuance of an injunction is not adverse to the public interest. Petitioner has shown in part a substantial likelihood that petitioner will prevail on the merits. The court preliminarily enjoins respondents from publicly producing through the New Mexico Inspection of Public Records Act or other means any photographic or visual depiction of the deceased bodies of Mr. Gene Hackman or Miss Betsy Arakawa Hackman in any format whatsoever, including any investigatory photographs, lapel camera footage, or autopsy photographs. The court otherwise denies the request for a preliminary injunction. All right, Mr. Summer, if you would prepare the order, I'll need that from you by the end of the week.
Your Honor, I have one clarification on the audio portion of your order.
Yes. So I'm denying the request for a preliminary injunction as it pertains to the audio. Any other clarification I need?
I have no other clarification.
Your Honor, I think I understood your oral ruling to be one that the county is enjoined from producing any photos, videos, other visual depictions of the deceased bodies of Betsy Arakawa Hackman and Gene Hackman. And I just want to make sure that it's the depictions of the bodies and not an outright refusal to disclose the video itself. The reason I'm asking this is because my understanding is that certain portions of the video have been blurred out to remove the depiction of a body, but otherwise disclose the display the inside of the house. And so I want to make sure the county's aware of its obligation within the court's order, whether it should outright omit from disclosure any videos that contain in any part the visual depiction of a body, or just the visual depiction of the body from the video.
And enjoining the county from disclosing any visual depiction of the bodies. All right, Mr. McKenzie.
Thank you, sir. Not to belabor a point, but just so I'm clear, Your Honor, earlier the court's ruling was that the ruling applied to audio, and I heard what you just said to Mr. Summer, but I want to make sure I'm clear. Are audio recordings enjoined, or are they not enjoined, sir?
They are not enjoined.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Sauer.
No questions, Your Honor.
And Mr. Williams.
Just for further clarification over here, as I understood in response to Mr. Reed's question, to the extent there is video that they have artificially blurred depictions of the bodies, that is not enjoined, is that correct?
That is not enjoined. So any depiction of the body needs to be, there shall be no depiction of either body in any video production or lapel production or in any image. That's my rule.
And so if they produced that video in which the body had been blurred, that would be consistent with the court's order?
That is consistent with my order.